Welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. If you enjoy our content, please like or subscribe.
Hi, welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. I'm DV Lebron. Do you have projects maybe you got to get done around the house? Maybe you got some construction needs? Check out K&H Construction. Chris Helms, local guy from Waxahachie, he'll take care of you. Let him know DV Lebron sent you. Today, my very special guest is Mr. Matt Zajic, who is running for Ellis County Precinct 2. How are you doing, sir?
I'm wonderful, DV. How are you?
I'm good. I really appreciate you coming on, and we did do a forum, and I like this format so much better because the candidates get to talk. It's just easier. I enjoy it, and it gives you time to speak to the people. So I'm grateful you came on. There's so many people in this county, that may not know you. So, this is where you get to talk to them directly. So I want to tell me a little bit about you.
Perfect. Well, thanks for having me, DV. It's things like this that really, I think, make a difference. Gets voters informed, and I think that's always a good thing.
Thank you, man.
I'm Matt Zajic. I'm running for Commissioner Precinct 2. I was born and raised in Ellis County, right here in Ennis. I grew up, outside of town. Grew up in the county per se. Didn't grow up within city limits. So I've been running the roads of Precinct 2 since I was just old enough to remember. We lived on a out of town road, so we always jumped. We were right on the line. Sometimes they would move the line from 879 to 34 to 879 to 34, and every time we'd either be in Precinct 1 or Precinct 2. But our farm and our headquarters and everything that we have now is in Precinct 2, so I'm thrilled about that and thrilled to have the opportunity to represent everybody from Precinct 2. But anyways, born and raised in Ennis, very active in the community growing up and whatnot. I was FFA, 4-H, showed cattle, built trailers on the show team for the metal shop for FFA. God, first job I had, I worked for a man named Bill Glaspie. He was an attorney, had a ranch in Ennis, just about, 3 miles from my house as the crow flies. And, managed some cattle down there for him. So really started my love for agriculture in high school through FFA and 4-H. And I had friends that had cattle and stuff as I was growing up. And that's, I guess, really where the fire started for agriculture inside of me. But did all of that, went to Tarleton, started my college career there, worked for the beef farm there, worked for the dairy there, studied agriculture science there, and decided, you know what, I really, really, really like finance, and I want to go to a school that is more geared towards finance. So I transferred to the University of Oklahoma, where I studied financial markets and sales, and decided that I was going to be this big, high-powered stockbroker, bond salesman type. As you can see, that worked out great because I went on a dozen interviews probably, and golly, I found out real fast that wasn't for me. And I had several offers from some really good brokerage houses and whatnot through some relationships that I have. And just I don't think what it boiled down to for me is I don't think I could live with myself if I didn't try to farm and figure out whether or not I could do it. And that was 12 years ago, I guess. No, 10 years ago. Yeah, 2026 is 10 years. 10 years ago. And here we are still farming and ranching. So I guess you could say I'm chasing my dreams still.
God has a funny way of putting you exactly where he wants you. And
Absolutely.
I mean, that was not the direction that you were supposed to go. And bam,
Right.
You're out farming. And, as we talked offline, you got a history of that, going back generations. And that is a beautiful thing. It's not something I've ever done. I just thought that meat just showed up at a market there for a little while.
Right.
I didn't quite know those things, but I got more educated as I went on. But what made you want to throw your hat into what is Ellis County politics? And before I move forward with that, I tell every candidate, thank you for wanting to serve your community in this rough and tumble thing that's Ellis County politics, because it's a hard thing to put your family through that, to go through the things that the bad jabs, the things that happen when you're campaigning. So thank you for wanting to serve your community.
Right.
But what made you want to go and do that?
Well, I appreciate that. I'll be honest with you. Politics was never really on my radar. It's something I followed, something I stay up with because it affects everyday people, right? It affects everybody. I always had this dream, farming and ranching. I'm going to build my empire per se. I'm going to build my farming and ranching empire, and I'm going to have somebody that cares about it as much as I do, and I'm going to turn it over to them, and I'm going to let them run it while I play the owner role in the background and make that work. And I'm going to go start another business. That's always been my passion, is just entrepreneurship. It's not so much the freedom of it or anything. I mean, they say you have freedom when you're self-employed, but that's when you don't work for anybody. You work for everybody when you're self-employed. But, that's kind of the path I always thought I would go down. And, I've been involved with so many different things as I got it more into my agriculture career, where I served on, the Santa Gertrudis Breeders International boards. I raised registered Santa Gertrudis cattle. And as a direct effect of what happens on my ranch and how I can help other people, I thought, you know what, I'm going to serve on the board and see if I can bring my expertise in cattle to the entire breed and, see if I can help us in any way. So I did that. And then, I started serving on the Texas Farm Bureau board, and I got to advocate for agriculture in different ways like that. And I've been involved with Texas Southwestern Cattle Raisers and Beef Cattle Federation and a bunch of these other boards and stuff, and either serving on committees underneath the boards or serving on the boards. And it kind of over the last 5 years got into my bones, where I'm like, man, I really like talking to people, and I really like helping people. And then when Lane decided to run for county judge, I thought, you know what, I'm going to pray about this, and I'm going to think it over real good, because I started thinking about this back in April or May. It's been a while, and started praying about it, started asking God for some guidance, and talked to my wife about it. And at first she was like, oh no, I'm not going to be a politician's wife. And I said, fair enough, but let's think about it. And we sat down and we talked about it and thought about it. And she looked at me one night and she said, I think you should go for it. And I said, okay. I'm going to do it. I feel like that's what's on my heart. That's what I'm going to do. And I just, I think that we can have really, really good people represent us. And that's what I hope to be for everybody, because at the end of the day, I think that's what politics is losing, is politicians are forgetting that they represent the people and not their ideas. And that's what I think it has got to change. And that's why I'm sitting here.
Well, that's, first, you went to the right place in asking whether to run.
Right.
That's always the first place to go. And you went to the 1.5, not the second to 1.5 place where you asked your wife. That is a very good thing. My wife had the exact same response when I said, what do you think? Yeah, she that was a hard no. But, and I get it. But, as a farmer, I'm sure you've experienced what happens when government encroaches into farming. The guy that, I have more experience, or not experience, but I remember what happened to the farmers in California, where they started, it had to do with water. And, the regulations with water basically made the Central Valley, which was big farming, ranching community, huge farming, ranching community, into a dust bowl.
Right.
Because they just couldn't get water for their crops and couldn't get water for their animals.
Right.
So it had a big effect. Government has a big effect on these things. So I want to ask you, what is the proper role of government in the lives of the people?
Short answer, as little as possible. But I mean, truthfully, that's true. I mean, as a conservative, you want limited government. The growth of government shouldn't outpace the growth of its people, of its constituents, the people it represents, because that just doesn't make a lot of sense. But I think the goal and the role of government is protect your citizens, do what's right by your citizens, and make sure that you're always doing everything you can do to take care of them. That's, I think, the three things that ring true. And try to make taxes as little as possible, because the government shouldn't be involved as much as possible. They should be involved in very little. So, I just,
those are your principles.
Still, that's about it.
No, and I try to get people to talk about their principles, because ultimately it doesn't matter what's going on. If those are your principles, that's what's going to guide you when you go forward. You could say all kinds of things, but if your principles say one thing, that's what you're going to do.
Absolutely.
So what would you say is the number one pressing issue? Like if you were elected, when the election comes, you're elected and you had the one that you could change anything you wanted by yourself. I know there's a team. What is the number one most pressing issue, and which one would you change?
Well, there's three that ring out in my head. I think the biggest is on a lot of people's mind, and it's growth. It's how fast Ellis County is growing. Looking at there's some reports out there that say we're the 8th fastest growing county in the nation, and we all see it. We all see the homes going up. We all see the farmland disappearing, and I hate that. I was thinking about that earlier. I was riding through town in Ennis, and I was headed from a friend of mine's house. I was helping him with something this morning, and I was headed out to my headquarters. And just driving through town, I was like, man, I remember whenever that was Jeff's feed store, and I remember whenever that was the John Deere house, and just kind of going through town, and it's just see all these changes happening. And you look back and you think, well, they've happened over 10 years, but golly, that happened fast, and I really think the number one issue is we need to tap the brakes on the growth a little bit, and in any way that the county can do that. I'm not saying that we got to all out stop it, because I don't think that's a good thing either, but let's tap the brakes and let's take care of what we have first and make sure that the infrastructure and all of that stuff is here when we do get to a point where that growth is here, like it or not. Then we can facilitate that growth in a smart way where it doesn't cost our current taxpayers a lot of extra money. That way, everything's there, everything's ready to go. The developers can pull their weight, and the county can do what it's supposed to do to protect its citizens. I think just a win-win situation there.
Matt, how do you do that? And something that you understand, protect property rights of these owners?
Yeah, property rights is huge. I really think it's just coming down to you've got to have these conversations with these developers and just tell them, look, it cannot cost our taxpayers one single red cent more than they're paying now in taxes if you want to build this subdivision. So if it's going to cost the county money to build roads, then we've got to figure out a way to work through that together where they're footing the bill for it. If they're the one building the subdivision and they're the one that is going to reap the benefit of that, then they need to pay for that. The same thing goes with most of the infrastructure for what these developers are going to build. That bill needs to be on them. And if there's going to be strain on public services, whether that be water or fire, EMS, police, sheriff's department, whatever, then they need to chip into that as well. Because obviously, 100% of the strain on them may not come from a subdivision, but they're going to add strain to them by that. So I think they should chip in on that as well. And I think all of that should be in an agreement before they break ground.
As I've been reminded before, there are two major responsibilities with the county, and one of them is roads and bridges, and the other is law enforcement and that whole entity. We're going to get into that part.
Yeah.
But as far as roads are concerned, what are your concerns with that, and what would you like to see done differently?
I think our commissioner of Precinct 2, Lane, has done a pretty good job of taking care of the roads and stuff. Everybody always, if you live on a dirt road, you have dust problems and stuff like that. And it's expensive to build roads. I mean, it is. But every chance that we can improve something and we have the funds to do it, then I think that's a good thing. But, I don't know if, they build, let's say they'll go in and build a new road, because I've seen this 1,000 times. They'll go in and they'll rip up the road base and everything, and they'll re-chip seal everything. And then 6 months later, boy, there's potholes and there's this and there's that, and there's all these issues with it where it slopes off, or there's indentions from trucks or something like that. Being a farmer and whatnot, we've built roads and done all of this stuff through farms and ranches and whatnot that we lease or own. And, I almost wonder if there's not, and I say that because I'm fairly confident that there is a better way to do it, where can we take a little more time to pack these underlayers a little better or lay a little finer rock down to get it packed in really good, wet it down a little more, make sure you're getting the right, I can't remember the word off the top of my head, but make sure you're getting a density. Make sure you're getting the right density there under that road for the base, and then chip seal on top of it. And if we just slow down and take a little bit of a breath, I wonder if we wouldn't have as many problems. And I'd be willing to bet we would.
That is the deeps of roads construction. And, I've had the mayors from all the different cities within all the big cities within Ellis County. And I've had the city managers talking about just how much these roads cost.
Yeah.
And it's just, there's a difference between scarification and that different ways you can fix it. And some of them being completely dug up and redone. But the problems in the millions, and gets bigger and bigger and bigger every year because you never quite could catch up. And the county, the county is experiencing this growth that you alluded to. It is monumental. And you're having certain like before, the county was what you were talking about, like where you grew up. In the county, that's where you had to farm.
Yeah.
But now you have a subdivision, like if you're living in the city of Waxahachie.
Yeah.
But you have subdivisions going up everywhere. So it looks like a city, but it's still county. And cities have unique problems that counties weren't kind of supposed to have. But tell me, as far as growth is concerned, you did mention earlier about limiting. What would you like to see done? Like what one thing you'd like to see done to limit growth? Is it legal? Can it even be done?
I think it is, because I think one thing, and I think in the forum, I think it was our current Commissioner Lane that touched on that, but let's come up with a set of county approved, county specified guidelines. If you're going to build a subdivision and you're going to build roads, this is how you're going to build them. And this is our spec. This is the way it has to go. If you're going to lay water line, this is our spec. This is how it has to go. If you're going to do any, and obviously you get into problems with, the different suds and stuff all have their different things.
I'm going to talk about that.
That's probably maybe a little out of the county's purview, but if we can make sure that all of these suds are working together and making sure that it's uniform throughout the county, I think that's a good thing. But I really think just a uniform standard set of specs on this is how Ellis County does things. If you're going to build in Ellis County, this is how it's got to be done as far as the roads and the bridges and stuff like that goes for the infrastructure for all this new development. I think that's a big plus to start right there. And then the other thing is, like I said, if they're going to add strain to public services, it should probably be a county policy, if you will, that they chip into that strain. You
had mentioned earlier about the infrastructure and stuff. And one of the biggest things, you can't talk about growth without talking about muds and pits, because muds and pits are everywhere, and it's they self-sustaining sewage plants itself, and that's how they get away, I believe, on having to build 1 acre homes.
Yep.
Because they can make their own sewage treatment plant, and this is causing a lot of issues to people in the county, because you have this little county road and you're putting this huge, ginormous development on this county road that was never meant for that.
Right.
So tell me, what are your thoughts on muds and PIDs? And I know that a lot of it has to be a state issue, but talk to me about your opinions on it.
So whenever this was, I'm trying to think, probably 4 years ago, something like that, Ellis County Citizens Against Muds, I think, was formed.
I remember that.
And I was good friends with the guy that formed it, and I backed him 100% with my support. And I was at meetings when it first started and all that stuff, because the mud that they were going to put in actually dumped the sewage, and the gray water is what I call it. I'm sure that's a technical term for it, but it all dumped into a creek it's between Garrett and Crisp area, kind of right in there. And it dumped into a creek there, and it flowed all the way over to Tellico, where my headquarters is, and in the creek that borders the bottom of part of the land that our family owns. And it's stuff like that as well. The roads, obviously it's going to be a big issue because you're going to put all that extra traffic on it, but it's stuff about where they dump the sewage and the wastewater and all that. But on top of that, after 3 years, that becomes a county's headache. Then the county has to take over that sewer plant that they built. So are these MUDs and the people building them, are they going to build them just to last about 3 years to where, well, it's county's headache now, let them fix it. So, I mean, I'm against these MUDs and whatnot, because I don't think they're needed here. I know in other places they've been used for protective purposes and whatnot of being annexed or whatever, but I don't think we have that problem here in Ellis County. Houston dealt with a lot of that, with all of the MUDs that they had, and then they had to try to incorporate all of those sewer systems and those water systems into Houston's water system, and I know it gave them fits for a long time, and it's probably still giving them fits. As far as what we can do about it on a county level, that's a tough question. I'd love to stand up and say, boy, we're just going to stop them from coming in here. But I don't know if we really have the power to do that. But what we do have the power to do, and your elected officials should carry some weight, especially if they take some constituents down to Austin with them and stand on somebody's desk and say, look, we're tired of this. We're not going to have this. And you've got to work with everybody, especially those in Austin, because that's where your funding comes from. So, not all of it, but a lot of it comes from Austin. You need to pull down as many dollars as you can from all of these different organizations that help with roads and bridges and the blah, 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 blah. We also got to be able to have the conversations of, hey, we don't like this. And you guys have got to do something about it, because you guys are the ones holding the purse strings for that as well.
Right. No, and there's so much control. And I mentioned this because I did an interview with our current state representative about that. And I did ask him about the outsized power of TCEQ and how they can do almost what they want, almost like text dot. They can do what they want. And that's just, that kind of power is just not, that's not a very Texan way to do things. And
it kind of goes back to the limited government that I was talking about earlier. Whenever I worked at the dairy at Tarleton, the man that I worked for, he actually had a heart attack at work one day. And he ended up spending a lot of time in the hospital in recovery, several months, after he got home doing rehab and all that, where he wasn't at work. So they entrusted the 18, 19, 20-year-old college student to do his job as well as the job that I was doing. So I did not realize how much power TCEQ has until I was in that role, because, and you want to talk about power that they have, visit a dairy sometime and ask those guys about TCEQ and the kind of restrictions and guidelines and this stranglehold they have on how you get rid of the cow manure from the dairy and where you can put it, how much you can put there and things like that. It's cow manure. At the end of the day, it's what's it going to hurt? So
it's like having two EPAs or two OSHAs.
Exactly.
It adds these extra burdensome things to everything that you do. Anything that touches the dirt, any water you have on your lap, it's a monster. It almost like the Texas legislature doesn't have to legislate about this. They just develop whatever they want at TCEQ. It's a very nasty thing, but
I am a way to waste tax dollars.
Yeah. I'm running low on time, but I definitely want to cover things like taxes, law enforcement. So let's go into taxes.
Sure.
People have been talking about, and the county's portion is smaller, but people have been talking about property taxes forever, especially, when you look at it, you could pay off your house, but you're still going to owe the government. And property taxes, they've been an issue, a long time issue, at least since I've been in Texas, and that hasn't been as long as you. Talk to me about property taxes and your thoughts on them and how you would approach them every year if you're elected.
So everybody likes to bang the gavel and say, oh, we're going to cut taxes. We're going to cut taxes. And then they get elected. And then it's like, oh, man, our budget's kind of a little thrown off. We got to raise taxes. So, I'm not going to sit here and say that I can cut your taxes by, there's 3 other commissioners and a county judge that I will have to work with. And, but I will say that I will do everything in my power to cut taxes if we can. And I think there's several ways to do that. And I think the best way to cut costs, which eventually will lead to lower taxes, is creating better efficiencies. If we can have more efficiencies in government, making sure that everybody's on the same page, everything runs smoothly, everything is going the way that it should do. There's no redundancies in, well, we have this computer system over here and this computer system over here and this computer system over here in different departments. And we're paying technology fees for all of them. And of course, that's a small thing, but it's still money that's being spent. Can we get everybody on the same system to where that system will talk to each other across all departments, and we pay one technology fee, have one training for it, things like that. So I think there's little efficiencies like that that'll make a big difference. And controlling spending, things like that. Anytime you talk about cost cutting or slowing spending, the first thing you have to remember, we don't want to infringe on any public services. We don't want to cut anything to police, fire, EMS, anything like that, because that's going to be a disservice to the constituency and to the citizens. So if there's ways that we can cut costs, go through the budget line by line. Let's look at it. Let's check it out. Let's highlight some things. Let's talk about them at Commissioner's Court. Where's this money going? Why is it going there? Or why do I see this in this budget and this in this budget? Is there a way that we can make this work better? Well, so I think it's just little things like that where you start cost cutting. I think you can lead to, at the bare minimum, the no new revenue rate. So taxes don't go up anymore. At least they're going to stay at what they are. But if we can, I know the largest part of the tax bill is school taxes. At least mine is. I would assume everybody else's is too.
Everybody.
Golly, I mean, it costs us a lot of money for school taxes. And then we have city taxes as well and county taxes. And I seriously think that the county taxes are the smallest portion of my tax bill.
It is the smallest portion.
But even if it's the smallest portion, it's still a portion of the tax bill. And if we can do better by our constituency by cost cutting, and in return, basically giving that money back to them in a tax break and a reduction of taxes, then that's what we need to do. But at the bare minimum, if we do nothing else, let's stop them from going up anymore. Let's try to keep them no higher than they are. Right.
Now you covered taxes and budget. I definitely want to talk to you about what I had told you about the two functions of one of the two major functions of Ellis County, and that number two was law enforcement, keeping the sheriff's office rolling. Yeah. The justice system rolling, the courts rolling. Right. That it's a monster. But let's start with the sheriff's department. There was an Officer Bias, who was killed in jail. Yeah. Their jail is aging, and I'm being very kind to it. And there's substations that could be used. There are needed. There's many things that the sheriff could use to do his job more efficiently. Talk to me about your thoughts on that, and what would you like to see done?
So, I mean, I'll be the first to tell you, I've heard the thing about the new jail floated anywhere from 500, I've heard, to 800 million. And man, you're talking about a behemoth of a project. I would say probably the largest project in Ellis County history. By a lot. I mean, for reference, like even the state of South Dakota was looking at putting a new state jail in that was going to be $500 million. And we're talking about a state jail versus a county jail. So, that's something that I think we could really tap the brakes on and take a hard look at, because I think a lot of the problem and why there's so much discussion about a new jail is we have an overcrowding problem. Jail stays very full. And I think, and I know from talking to a lot of people throughout the county and whatnot, a lot of that goes back to mental health. We have people that have mental health problems or have been picked up for a mental health issue or something like that, and we don't have anywhere to put them. So they put them in the jail. And I've heard estimates at 30%, I've heard estimates at 60% of people that are sitting in the jail that have a mental health problem, that they're realistically not getting the help they need in jail. So before we go spend 500, 800, $1 billion, whatever the number is, on a new jail, I really beg the question if it wouldn't be more advantageous for us to build a mental health facility to where these folks can get the help that they need to A, not be repeat offenders, and B, just, I mean, really help them be the best that they can be and get the help that they need, because I think that could be huge. I think that can help, the people that are picked up by the sheriff's department that have mental health issues. I think it can be a big thing for veterans. I think it can be a big thing for just people in the community that need help with mental health. I think it can be a multifaceted thing to where it serves a lot of industries. Sorry, my business.
I'm not sure. Right.
But it serves a lot of people across different things in different areas that maybe aren't seeing the help that they need right now. And then let's say that number is 30%. And they can go to a mental health facility and get the help they need. Well, we just knocked 30% off the overcrowding problem in the jail. And let's say it's more than that. Some estimates are 50 or 60%. Well, now we've emptied half the jail out, and those folks are getting the help that they need. And I think if you built a mental health facility like that right and did it, had the future growth in mind and had a business mindset to it, you can build that mental health facility and probably build it a little bigger than you need it. And then you can sell beds to surrounding counties that have the same problem, surrounding cities that have the same problem, because you've got Dallas Behavioral in DeSoto. You've got Greenpoint, I think is what it's called. And they don't always have beds available because they're full. And that should say a lot about the mental health.
Often full.
Yeah, often full, very often. And I think that says a lot about the mental health problems, that it's not just Ellis County seeing those mental health problems. It's statewide, probably nationwide. In Ellis County, let's be a leader and get ahead of that problem and really make a difference on it. So, I mean, I think that's something that would be huge and definitely going to be a big part of my campaign, and something that I want to look real good and hard into.
I've heard you talking about that. It's certainly innovative. It's different. Now, the other thing that's been brought up as I close before I give you the mic, one last question is, there's been conversations. Waxahachie's doing a study for a place to put the pets, a pound. I know there's probably a better word for it, but a pound. And they're looking at that. They're doing a study. Some other places are doing studies. ASPCA took off. They didn't want to do that no more. I don't know the exact things that happened there, but the county does have an animal control problem. Talk to me about that and what are your thoughts on that before I give you the mic to close out.
So the animal control problem, this is something that I've talked about since I started my campaign. I think the very first speech I gave at a in-person event, I talked about an animal control problem, and it is an issue. And a shelter is great, and we need one by all means. I'm not saying we don't need one, but a shelter doesn't fix the problem. If you build a shelter with 1,000 stalls in it, for lack of a better term, you're going to have 1,000 animals in that shelter, So I think what it really boils down to is you got to get down to the heart of the problem. So how can we stop the dumping of dogs and cats and other animals that we have issues with? I mean, the dogs and cats are going to be the biggest ones. How can we stop the dumping of those animals? I mean, do we need tougher fines? Do we need, obviously you don't want to say, throw them in jail because we've already got an overcrowding problem.
Right.
But I don't
think the sheriff would be too happy with you.
No, I think he'd probably have me for that one. But I think we can do things like, bigger fines, tougher fines on these people. Maybe, maybe we need more animal control officers and whatnot. And maybe we can do things like you build a mental health facility. Maybe we can incorporate that into the mental health facility and have those folks use that as a method of rehab that'll help them. At Tarleton, whenever I worked there, we had a rehab facility there. They used horses to rehab people. And man, you can just, it was right next to my office where that was, and you could see the difference that it made in people. So I think that's going to be the biggest thing is I would say, let's get a group of people together in the county that it affects, people that own shelters, people that are passionate about it, things like that. And let's sit down and come up with concrete, hard, this is going to be the best way to fix it through all those different opinions in the room. Because at the end of the day, that's how you're going to fix everything, is communication. Communication with cities, communication with constituency, communication across the county departments. Everybody's got to talk. Everybody's got to get along. You ain't got to like each other, but you got to get along. I'm sure everybody's parents said that to them about their siblings. You don't have to like each other, but you got to get along. So
yeah, most certainly, Matt. Definitely have to do. Y'all got to get along.
I think that's the biggest thing, is we've got to get along, and we've got to have transparency with our constituency, with cities, counties, local governments, all the way across the board. Everybody needs to know what's going on, because everybody can help fix the problem.
I'm old, but I remember in The Price is Right, Bob Barker, he would always chime in about spay and neuter pets.
Absolutely.
And maybe that's something that we might have to, but those fines,
Yeah.
I mean, if there were some pretty hefty fines for doing that,
Yeah.
people would probably think twice about that.
Absolutely. And if you build a shelter in Ellis County, and when you build a shelter in Ellis County, I think that's almost a no-brainer part of it. You've got to be able to do a low-cost or no-cost spay and neuter clinic, once a month or once a quarter or something like that. Because at the end of the day, that's going to help curb the problem a lot too, because you're attacking it at the source of the problem and not just saying, oh, let's throw a shelter up, because it's just going to fill up and you're still going to have the same problem.
Yeah, if you've been to Dallas County Shelter, that's exactly it. They're
Absolutely.
like capacity all the time. Well, I like to give the candidates a little bit to talk directly to the people of Ellis County, so I'll shut up and let you go ahead.
Well, I appreciate it, DV. It's been a lot of fun. This has
Thank you.
been a great interview. I think I talked about this at the forum in my closing statement, and I think I'd kind of have to just stick with that, because at the end of the day, God, family, and my love for helping people and wanting to do right by people is why I'm doing this. It's those three things, because I'm guided by my faith in God and my morals that provides me. There's no way I could do this without the support of my family. My family is everything. My beautiful wife, Haven, we've been married for, God, put myself on the spot there, 2 years. 2 years? 2 years. She piped up in the background and said 2 years, son.
Don't get yourself in trouble, my friend.
To be fair, we dated and got married all in under a year. So, but no, we've been married for 2 years. My son, Kent, I really just want him to grow up in the same Ellis County that I did. Obviously, it's not the same as it was when I was young, but let's try to put all of that big city growth off as long as we can, so our kids can grow up in a small town, rural value county, because that's what matters. And the people, the Constitution of the United States starts with the 3 words, we the people. That is everybody. Everybody listening to this podcast, me, you, everybody. Government cannot forget that it serves we the people. They're not serving the other commissioners on the board. They're not serving the people that they feel beholden to in Austin. They serve their constituency, and that's it. And, I think with those 3 things and those 3 understandings, man, I think we can do great things in Ellis County.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and going on the forum too. I didn't know you before then, and I'm grateful to like the many experiences I've had in the last 5 and change. I'm grateful that I've gotten to meet you and many of the other candidates. It's always such a positive experience. Can you stick around after the show real quick?
Absolutely. Yes, sir. Great. And I appreciate everything you do as well. You're really making a difference out there. And I hope